I just enjoy teaching others about things that's going on in the school districts and different schools in the community. I like to help others, and basically, the most thing that I focus on is the youth here in the city of Detroit. I intern with the mayor. This will be my second year interning with the mayor, and that's pretty much it.
Hi, my name is Adriana Mosca, and I'm a senior at Cesar Chavez Academy High School, which is a charter school. And so, to me, the most important thing about the purpose of education is to learn. You learn about the mistakes of the past. You learn about things that you wouldn't think you'd actually learn outside of school, or since you're always learning something, you're always using that in your life, no matter what it is. You could have English, you might hate it, but you're gonna learn how to write emails, how to write letters to family members, or how to write a resume for your future job. And to me, the most important thing about being able to have an education is that you have people that are depending on you to actually go forward with your life and be able to stand up for what you believe in and be able to do what you want with your life, because you have higher education and you got you have the knowledge to become somebody bigger than yourself. And the reason I want to speak about education is because I want to be like a role model for my siblings. I want my parents to be proud of me for getting a higher education, for knowing what I want to do with my life, and being able to become somebody that my family, my friends, my siblings, everybody that I know appreciates me and is proud of what I do.
Thank you, all three of you. And we may come back to in the questions more about the purpose of education, right? Because it's certainly a big question for all of us, and we may revisit that with the students as well. I put together a couple questions for the students. The second question that I wanted to put to the students, we don't have to necessarily go in that same order, but if you want to do that, you can. Between the three of you, or among the three of you, we have 2 public high schools, right? 1 charter school. And something that we've spent a lot of time in this class, and certainly if you open up the papers on any given day over the last probably, 10 years, you hear so many different things about what's actually what's going on in the schools. You hear all this sort of sensational ideas about what's happening in the schools. You hear lots of figures, lots of numbers. We haven't had the chance yet in this room to hear from students in the schools. So actually describe for us, what is going on in your school on a daily basis. And another question maybe before that is tell us about your experience just with schooling in general. Have you been a part of many different schools? Have you been a part of a few different schools? Have you changed schools? So we'd love to hear a little bit about kind of your experience going through schools over the years, but also what's happening in Western right now. Are there teachers you like? Are there teachers you don't like? Why? That kind of thing. So just bring us into your school and bring us into your schooling, the kind of history a little bit.
So I've been going to public school since preschool, and I attended Academy of the Americas, which is a bilingual school. I attended it preschool through 8th grade, and it was the best elementary and middle school. My mom had actually made me go to another school, Earhart, and I cried because I just didn't feel welcomed. And at the Academy of the Americas, it was just family. We grew up together. It was preschool through 8th grade, and it was the best feeling ever. And I'm at Western now, and it's really diverse, but I like it. I like that it's diverse, but no one's separated. All the cultures are mixed together, and it just feels like the same atmosphere as the Academy of the Americas. And that's one thing I like about my school. But of course, there's stuff I don't like. I feel the lack of resources is the biggest problem. And by that, I mean, like, not all my classes have textbooks. So in some classes, I have to share a textbook with the person next to me. And that's like really frustrating because I'm like ready to turn the page and they're like, no, wait, I'm still reading. And I'm just there like, oh my God. And especially in open book tests, I'm like, I'm not gonna get caught cheating. Like, I just have to like wait for my turn. And especially when it comes to homework, when we have homework out of the book, I have to take a picture with my camera and go home and try to stay focused while notifications are coming in. And it's like, oh my God, distractions. But it's like, no, my education. But also, I feel like my classes are like oversized. And I was like, oh, I'm so tired of being in a class with like 40 people. Let me join AP. So I went to my AP English class and it's like, oh look, 35 kids too. And it feels like I never get the one-on-one with my AP teacher. And I can honestly say, like, this morning, my teacher lost my essay. And I was so mad. I was like, oh my God, like, if you wouldn't have this many students, then you wouldn't have lost my essay. But I'm writing it right now, so. And also, I have like, last year I experienced that I didn't rush the class. So my teacher, I got into class and there wasn't any desk. And he's like, you can sit on the floor. And I was like, sit on the floor? Like, where do they do this at? And I was like, that really, like, it hurt. I was like, I have to sit on the floor. And I told him, I was like, mister, I am a 3.8 student. I come to school, like, I have to sit on the floor. Until finally, I went across the hall and I got a chair. But I had to pull up the chair and share with, like, someone. And I was like, oh my God, no elbow room. Like, oh. Like, and that bothers me that there's not all these resources. Because some people, they lose interest in school because like they feel like, oh, like there's not even a textbook, there's no desk, I have to sit on the floor, like my teacher loses my essay. Like, you know, like that really discourages people. But luckily, like I really value education and I don't let that affect me. Like I know like the environment I am, it's like, it's not the best, but I'm hoping like I can bring like all those negative things and I can actually change it so that people won't have to go through that. And like, you know, I can make the future generations not have to sit on the floor.
So can I get the question again?
So, the question was just, tell us a little bit about your schooling experience. Which schools have you gone to? And then bring us into your school a little bit. What came like?
I have been to Howell Elementary, which is now Hutchinson Elementary. I've been to Howell, well, both of the schools. Howell was from preschool to 5th grade, and then I graduated 5th grade, and then that summer when I graduated, it turned into Hutchinson, and I went back for 6 through 7, and then I changed schools to A.O. Holmes, and graduated from there and went on to King High School. Things that's going on inside King is, I'm one of the student leaders, so basically I'm shadowing the principal, the assistant principal, security, and everything. So the teachers in the schools, we have many teachers in there who are dedicated to the students. We have teachers who just come in with a bad attitude, If you come in with a bad attitude just because of traffic or today is not your day and you take it off on the students, every morning the students is going to expect that from you, You bringing up that negative energy every morning. You're going to say, okay, we know she ain't feeling good, so we're going to, act a fool. And, King is, a very great school in football, basketball. I don't know about baseball, but it's okay. But, I run the mile, track, the fastest miler, the only miler at King High School. And, we have, lack of teachers, lack of resources. We just had a teacher who retired in the middle of the school year. And we still don't have a teacher yet. So, last year I helped Detroit Public Schools and school walkout, teacher walkouts. I've been the last in speaking on these type of issues about 30, 40 kids inside a classroom. That is ridiculous. I don't think anybody can learn in an environment like that. And for me, I goes to teachers after school. I stay at school from 8 to 6 every day, Monday through Thursday. Not, playing around. I have track practice. I try and get so much help that I can to actually graduate next year. It's like, I talk to many kids, they feel like they want to drop out, go get a job. I mean, the teacher's not pushing them to actually, become somebody in life. The teachers just talk down about the students. Like, that's not going to help anyone if you're going to keep putting them down. If you're going to put them down, just don't say anything to them, period. And so, me doing the walkouts last year, looking at the teachers, not really supporting the issues that was going on. We definitely need parents involved in issues like that. The parents is, I would say, the key to the answer. Because if you have the parents involved in these type of situations, I think that the state and city officials will actually listen to what they have to say. Because the first thing is the parents' involvement with the students, with the teachers. I was working with Alicia Mayweather and many more people in Detroit public schools. And with Peter, we walked last year. We did door knocking about the new community district. And as I think about the new community district, is that I believe it's still the same. Nothing has changed. And basically what I told the teacher about the other day is that, they saying that we have 28 schools that will be getting shut down. And, as I look at that, that's very ridiculous to close 28 schools here in the city of Detroit. And, and they basically saying, the new school board will sign a contract for like a year. And basically that contract said, if you bring these test scores up in a year, we will allow you to keep control of the schools. If not, we will take over, the state will take over. And a year is not, everybody knows that's not possible. They even bring up test scores in 28 schools if they already at the 5% low, And, as I look at it, if you don't good in that 1 year, who say they gonna add more schools to that list? And 28 could turn into 50. 50 could turn into all the DPS schools. And then where would the kids go? That's the main, that's the question right there. Is it a voucher? A voucher, really? Why would you can't keep these schools open? That's really, the big concern right there. And many teachers like, what about this school, the new superintendent? We got a superintendent from Florida. Why you coming from Florida to Detroit to be a superintendent? Now, the schools down in Florida are pretty worse than here in Detroit. And you want to come to Detroit? No, that's not good. Then we got a guy from, I forget where he's from, but he's from Michigan. I just saw a video last night that he, stepped down from that job without any, without telling anybody about that, not even stepping down. And it was many issues on why he stepped down. And it's not, he's not fit to be the superintendent for the new community district, and we should keep Alicia Mayweather. And Alicia Mayweather have helped many students in the Detroit public schools community district, and she has helped me a lot, mentored everything. And for us to keep, looking back at the teachers or the superintendents, parents need to get out and help save these schools. Teachers cannot do it alone. Schools cannot do it alone. I have organized many rallies, events, and with other students from different schools, CAS, and many more. And we had teachers help, but the main concern was parents. We needed parents to actually be involved in these types of events. And that's it.
we want to hear from Adrian, but I just want to add one quick thing to what Jalen just said about Alicia Merriweather. And so I believe there's still, I heard on the radio in today on NPR that some of the school board members in Detroit were actually in Florida right now visiting some of the schools that, I can't remember the name of the gentleman, Vidi. Duval, Florida District, yes. So there's just some of you may know this, some of you may not know this, but there's two official finalists, right? And one is, and I'm not going to say his name, but from Duval, Florida, and then another, Derek Coleman, I believe, is from the River Rouge District. Alicia Merriweather, who Jalen just talked about, and if you know this already, forgive me. If you don't know this, I just want to underline this. She born and raised in Detroit, taught in the district for a very long time, has been the interim superintendent for the last year. She was appointed by the last emergency manager, Stephen Rhodes, right? And there's been, if you haven't paid attention to this, look up Alicia Merriweather, ALYCIA, and there's petitions going around right now to try and pressure the board, the new elected school board, right? To try and pressure them to consider her as a finalist in the superintendent search. And it's a very interesting coalition that's developed around this that cuts across. The unions are behind her. There's business leaders around the city that are behind her. And so we can talk about and kind of try and analyze why and how that's happening. But for now, I just want to let you know it is happening. And there's a lot of people that are pushing for Alicia to be considered. And so just pay attention to that. So thank you, Jillian, for bringing that up. And you mentioned many things we probably want to come back to. But I want to turn to Adrian so we can hear a little bit more about Cesar Chavez Academy and your experience going to schools in Detroit.
Well, to start off, I didn't start going to Cesar Chavez Academy since elementary school. I actually started at a public school called Priest Elementary. I think they've changed the name by now, since I haven't gone there for a long time. And after the 4th grade, I moved schools. I moved to a different district in schools. So I went to a school in River Rouge called Sabbath. I didn't stay there for very long because even though it was a minority school, there was very little Hispanics and they were outed, and I got severely bullied, so I had to leave. And then I switched into Cesar Chavez during my 5th grade year, sometime late October. And since I didn't know anybody there, I was kind of outed there too. And then I ended up going to middle school and high school, and the buildings are actually extremely tiny. So all the classrooms are kind of bunched up. There's very little resources, as in in my high school. So this year I ended up taking AP Calculus, and my class size was about 35 students. Since we actually have very little students in the high school, it shouldn't have been a problem. But since the class sizes are so small, we had to go outside of the classrooms and ask for desks and chairs for students to actually be able to sit inside the classroom. And even then, we'd have way too little space to actually move around, so the tables and the chairs were all bunched up, and people were extremely uncomfortable. And some people couldn't actually see the board where the teachers were writing on, because we don't actually have smartboards. Most of the classrooms don't have smartboards. They have whiteboards, and they're still using them. And my AP government class has textbooks that have been used over the past 8 years. So they're extremely outdated. They're since Barack Obama's time, his first term. But there are things that I do like about the school, as in the teachers. Since it's a small school, there's little students, and I actually get a one-to-one feel with the teachers because of how little students there are. And the school actually provides a list of days, an actual schedule from day to day each month about what days teachers are staying for tutoring, what days people can stay for school to get extra help if they need it, that they can end up asking people for help, they can stay after school for help. And we have a lot of extracurricular activities, I joined robotics, and I actually really love it, so I've been in robotics for about 3 years now. And we have an actual cultural club called Club Clue, but we don't really do much in the Club Clue because it's not really seen as that big of a deal, even though we have lots of different cultures in our school, but they're not really seen as that important. And, well, let me see. That's it.
So I want to, pardon me, I wanted to ask the students one more question for each of you, if you want to comment on, and then you are all going to have an opportunity to ask questions of the students too, but what I have in mind is pivoting to the second part of the panel and then opening it up. So hopefully that works for everybody. The question that I wanted to ask is, and I know that Alondra and Adrian, you're involved with 482 Forward, which we've learned about. And Jalen mentioned different leadership roles you've had. You talked about door knocking. You mentioned the word walkout. And so this is leading to my question, which is, and this is something that a lot of us I know have been posting about on our online course tool, which is like, what can I be doing? What can I do about this? Like, what is my role? And so before we ask that question more broadly, what do you think? You're doing something, all three of you, by being here, but what do you think, what are you asking your friends to do? What do you think high school students in Detroit, what role do high school students in Detroit have? You talked about parents, but let's talk a little bit more about students in trying to affect positive change in the schools, in the systems, whether it's charters or public. Like, what should more high school students be doing? If you were to tell them, if you could tell them what to do, what would you tell them? Maybe we'll start with Alondra, and then we can hear from Mishuga.
So I think students need to learn that their voice really matters, because we are the people who are closest to the problems, because we're at school every day, we're dealing with all these things daily, we're at school more than we're at home. So I feel like if we go out and we don't just let it pass, we'll graduate soon, and we're actually trying to make change, and we're actually sharing our stories with other people, maybe they can give us ideas and kind of help us start a movement, make change. And I feel like with 482 Forward, that's what I do. I come and I share my story, and I tell all the mentors and my peers, what do we do about this problem? What do I do because I don't have textbooks? And what do I do because I don't have a teacher in some of my classes? And I feel like the most important thing about making change is gathering lots of students. And I feel since I feel and I know that our voice is really powerful, even if most people don't feel that way, I think that I just feel youth can make change even though it doesn't always feel like that. And I just want to show my peers that they can make change.
What's the question?
So just hearing from you about maybe a little bit more about why you're involved in doing work with 482 Forward, even the youth collective you could talk about, and more generally, how would you like to see how would you like to see your peers getting more involved in making schools or the fighting for change in the schools?
Well, for me, since I go to a charter and I've been hearing about schools being closed just because they're DPS schools, I've actually tried talking to some of my friends about it, and they have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. So I want them to become more informed about what's happening in their city, since they live in the city. And some of their siblings actually go to DPS schools because their parents don't really see the difference, so they just put them in whatever school is closest to home. Since there's an actual DPS school right behind my high school, and it's an elementary school, and so they have their siblings right behind there, and that school is possibly closing this year. And they weren't actually informed about it, and they have no idea what's going on around their city, around their surroundings. They have no idea who's doing what. They have no idea who controls what they do in school, how the school gets their money, what classes close, what classes open up, what schools open up, what schools close. And I just want my students, my friends, my peers, all to become more informed, to actually find out what's going on, ask people, ask other adults. Even if they give you vague answers, you need to ask other people to actually figure out what's going on and to see if you can actually start helping something, because we are the closest people to the problem. Just like Alondra said, we are the people that are more affected to the schools, even though we think we might not be. It's just like, it's not my school, it's not closing. I'm fine. No. Your family members could be going to that school. They could be sad about not having to go to school anymore because the closest school to them is being shut down, and now they have to go to a school that's possibly outside of their district, outside of their city. Could be about 3 cities away, which is the closest school. And schools are being opened and closed, and most of the new schools that are being opened are actually in certain parts where there's very little students actually going to school. So students now have to go like a 45-minute drive from their house to school every day, just because schools that were extremely close to their house ended up getting shut down. And yeah, I think I just think I want my friends and my family members to actually just become more informed, and then try to see what they can do to spark up something inside of themselves. See if they have something that they know that they can contribute. Like, they can try to find different outlets, like try to start up something like, call their representatives, tell them to stop closing down schools, call their representatives to actually go out and represent them, because they're the ones who voted for them, they're the ones who are supposed to stand up for them, and they're supposed to be the ones that that have that are speaking for them, even though you can speak for yourself. And that's it.
So, for the last 2 weeks, I've been trying to get students. For the last 2 weeks, I've been trying to get students to actually do a press conference to try and get Alicia Mayweather back, to put her on a final list for superintendent. And I have talked to a couple of students from Cass to actually participate in this. And most of the students that came, they informed of, why the schools are being closed and how can they get involved. And the connection that me and other students have, other leaders in King have with the students is that we don't, just tell them, oh, we want you to come help us with this project. We actually talk to them, explain to them what is going on, and, hear from them and see, what they think about, the different issues that are going on in the schools. And so many students support the ideas that we throw at them. That's what we do, is throw them at them. We don't, have no questions at all. And me, I'm all about change in these schools. It actually happened, it just, politics and everything in the schools just got thrown at me by a teacher, an economics teacher. And he's like, go to this meeting, to a city council meeting, and, this is your homework assignment, the whole class. And I went to him and I was like, oh, I love it. And so many students ask me, why did you get into this? Why are you doing this? Do you really care about, the schools? Yes, I do. I mean, it's my future. Well, I'm almost about to be graduating next year. And, after, many people, they graduate from high school, they forget all about it. But you can't just do that. You have to, after you graduate, you have to come back, and still remind the kids, this is why you're going to school. This is what happened. This is what happening to the schools here in the city. This is your superintendent, the people that represent you. And so many students, they really, cares about, their schools, and they make sure that, that the right things are going on. And I have been talking to many kids today, last week, about what changes can we do to actually, prevent this from happening 5 years from now. We don't, just want to, okay, this issue is done. And so we don't know if this might come back at us from 5 years from now. We don't just think about what's next year gonna bring up. We think ahead, like 5 years or, And so many students are, encouraged to do these types of things, promote change in their community, schools, and that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Jalen. Let's thank all of our, we're going to hear more from you tonight, but let's thank all of our student panelists, Alondra, Adrian, and Jalen. Absolutely. And I want to pivot here and briefly introduce Becca, and of course have Becca introduce herself a little bit more too. But I want to kind of piggyback off of what Jalen was talking about earlier. You started talking about parental involvement, which of course there's multiple stakeholders in all these schools that we're talking about, and parents of course are critical to all of us, right, in the obvious ways, and in schooling as well. And so Becca, just briefly, Becca will introduce you more. Becca grew up in Detroit and went to DPS schools her whole life, and is very connected to, in multiple ways, the Boggs School, which you'll hear a little bit about as well. But for now, I'm mostly interested. I'm going to ask each of our panelists, more adult panelists, or older panelists, I should say. We'll find out if they're more adult, but they're definitely older. Each of them a question, and then we're going to open it up. And so for Becca, just maybe tell us a little bit about the challenges of being a parent in this system and how you reconcile it with your own experience.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Greg. I am Rebecca Wheeler. I grew up right here in this neighborhood. I've lived here for the last 40 years, because I'm 41, which is over 40, and also almost 40 if you estimate down. Anyway, depends on how you look at it. But I went through Detroit Public Schools, kindergarten through 12th grade. I went to Burton International School, and then I went to Cass Tech. My husband went to Renaissance and King, so our family can claim a lot of good stuff. So I felt like while I was in Detroit Public Schools, and ever since then, I feel like I can confidently say I received an excellent education that prepared me for life, and it prepared me for college. It prepared me for most of the things I felt like I needed from school. Part of that, like Jalen mentioned, was that my parents were extremely involved. They were hugely involved, especially K through 8 in Burton International. Kids that went to that school still go up to my dad and say, "Hey, you're Mr. Dorn." So I feel like not only did they make an impact on me, they made an impact on all of the children that went there, because they, as parents and as leaders of a parent group, made a huge difference. So I feel like I have a lot of big shoes to fill as a parent in Detroit. And my experience doesn't exactly echo the experiences that you've heard already, because I feel like things have changed in the city quite a bit. But I feel like the one thing that remains consistent is that we have really awesome teachers in our schools, and the teachers is where I feel like the relationship between the teachers and the students is where I feel like change is possible, and where I feel like all the action is. Anyway, I wanted to tell you a little bit about my perspective so you could understand parts of what went into, what goes into how I chose a school for my children, and how I think about being active in that school and in Detroit as a community. So I did go through Detroit Public Schools myself, and then my sister's children went through Detroit Public Schools for some time when things started getting difficult, right before emergency management took over. And so I was doing their homework with them, I was going to school with them, so I was seeing sort of secondhand how some of the changes were affecting students in the schools. Then I became a social worker and an infant mental health therapist, and nobody's probably ever heard of that. But Basically, I became a specialist in child development for infants age 0 to 3, and I worked with their parents in home visits. I worked with the parents and children on their relationship because, again, it solidified my understanding of how important the context of relationships are to any change or personal growth. It all happens within relationships. And so that's my perspective that I apply to schools, and the teacher-student relationship in particular, I think, is central to personal growth for students and for the community. So my perspective on the purpose of education is also influenced by Grace Boggs, because when I was in high school, as a sophomore, I joined Detroit Summer in its first year, and I got to work with Grace and Jimmy and all of the great experiences of Detroit Summer. I worked as a volunteer for a number of years, and then I became an organizer of the program, and then I became a board member of the program, and I stuck with it for many, many years. So I gained a ton of perspective from that experience as well. And one of the most pivotal and lasting lessons that I learned in the School of Detroit Summer was, I think the first day we gathered here in this place, and we spoke in the parlor a little bit, which is the other room around the corner. But then we came into this exact room 25 years ago, and Grace Boggs asked me, what is your vision of a perfect Detroit? What do you think Detroit needs? What do you think Detroit should be? And then she broke us up into groups and made us write it down and draw a picture and really, really answer that question. And she didn't ask it in a way that it was like a group project. She always had a way of demanding your personal attention and your personal answer to her question. And I feel like looking at a question, depending on how you look at it, it really makes a difference. And so that was my first introduction to visioning. That's what she would call these things, visioning workshops. And so if you read in one of the readings, Julia described one of the things Grace asked her when she decided to build the Boggs School was imagine your future students graduating in their cap and gown. And what does that look like? What does that kid have that their school gave them? And that's part of visioning. And so I feel like looking at issues that way has been extremely helpful and also very informative, because before that, when I would look at a school, I would think, what does the building need to have, and what does a classroom need to have? And you need pencils and paper, and you need a certain number of desks. But when I look at it in terms of the experience of the student and the idea of myself as a community member, what do I want kids coming out of school to have? What do I want schools to offer and interplay with kids? It's a whole different look at things. So when I became a parent, I'm a parent of 3 children, 2 of which are old enough to attend Boggs and go there, and the 3rd one will start kindergarten at Boggs in the fall. She's in preschool right now. When I became a parent, my cohorts who were my friends that were my age, that were living in the city, many of them were moving out of the city because they were having children. And everybody kept saying, oh, Detroit is so much fun, but I wouldn't raise my kids here. And probably half of the reason for that was that they didn't feel safe sending their kids to school. And I don't mean because they would get shot or something like that. They just didn't feel like the schools offered what the kids needed. And so they were moving out of the city. not only about schools, but specifically because they were having children, and partially, largely because of the schools. So some of my friends, Julia and myself, and a couple of the other friends, Anna and Jackie, who developed Avalon Bakery, created a group called Detroiters Dream for Children, because what we found was we were the ones that were deciding, no, Detroit's the one place I would want to raise kids. I absolutely want to stay in the city. Why would you want to raise kids anywhere else? Like, I had the most amazing experience growing up in this city, and I would want that for my children. And part of that is having your eyes open to many of the realities that are part of an urban upbringing, and specifically Detroit. And so we started Detroiters Dream for Children, and we had all been activists in the community, and when you have kids, it changes. You have to be a different kind of activist. And so our question was, how do we become and transform and still remain activists, but as parents, and include our children? And one of the questions we asked was similar to what is the purpose of education, but it was, what do our children need from schools? Anyway, that was part of what helped me sort of formulate, having these conversations in these relationships is what helped me really start to think about what kind of school I would like to send my kids to, what kind of schools are there right now in my neighborhood, and what can I expect from my kids in the city of Detroit through education. Anyway, I think the important part of that is that the community and conversations and awareness, like you guys said, like people don't even know what's going on. But talking to people in conversation is what helps build that awareness, but framing it around solutions and moving forward is what allows progress to be made. So I think both of those things are really important. So I did decide to send my kids to a charter school. Bog School was not open when my first child entered school, and so they went to University Prep Academy. And there were lots of things that I thought that I struggled greatly with not sending them to Detroit Public Schools, but at that time, the defining factor was that I felt like it wasn't even physically safe to send my kids. My niece and nephew had been in classes that were over 40 students. The teachers were so undervalued that they spent most of every day screaming at the children, who were very young, and very little ability to experience any extracurricular things or field trips or things like that. And so I just felt like emotionally, as an infant mental health therapist, I could not think of sending my kids to be farmed into, a factory prep school. And so I picked a school where I knew they had smaller classrooms, where I knew they had a component that recognized the social emotional development of children. And that's what was important to me. It wasn't a skilled trade school, which I think are important, but it was something that I think recognized the importance of relationships. And so when the Bog School opened up, it was actually really important timing, because UPA had changed administrations and no longer recognized social emotional relationships in the way that I valued. And so now they all go to the Bog School, and the thing that I like probably most about the Bog School is that they think about education in terms of the child's experience. What does this child need to reach their full potential and to contribute the most to the community? And I was lucky enough to participate through, I was very close friends with all of the founders of the Bog School, and I was part of many of their discussions. And so I knew immediately that my kids would be safe, and they would all figure out together what they needed. and they would find a way to get it. And so what I like most about it too is that because they're focused on figuring things out together, all of the kids are called solutionaries. So that's on the back of all their shirts, and it's a great way to think about what is the purpose of education. It's about learning how to find your own answers. It's not the blank slate theory where one person knows everything and feeds it to the other. It's about helping grow people to be full community contributing citizens. And so they're encouraged to find their own solutions and work together within that context of relationships.
Thank you, Becca. In addition to having Brian introduce himself and talk a little bit about purpose of education, I want to offer up in the middle of the room a phrase, a labor slogan that some of you may recognize, some of you may not have heard of before, but it's this, it's the students' learning conditions are the teachers' working conditions. That's a slogan, that the students' learning conditions are the teachers' working conditions. And you don't have to speak directly to that, but certainly we've heard a lot about the conditions, and I'm wondering from your standpoint, what you can share, Brian. Thank you.
Can I take 1 minute to walk a circle around this room? It's practical. I promise this will be practical, and we'll help answer that.
Certainly.
All right, Craig said that students' learning conditions are teachers' working conditions, and he's right. And the students are calling out and they're saying things that are very, very practical and valuable, and I can validate over my 25-year career. And I thought it was kind of interesting the way Craig introduces us, and so us being the older adults. There's some nice phrase that he used that when I look at my colleagues on the adult panel, that makes me the elder statesman, and I'm not so sure I love that a lot, but I'll take it. Bing, ring, 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 ring. It's time for first hour. First hour, please stand. I counted off roughly, and I don't want anyone to help me with my math, but I think that's about 40 people. My classrooms have between 38 and 39, and sometimes I'm really happy when I have a 37th hour or 37 student class. Thank you, first hour, for all of that homework. You may sit down. Second hour, ring, ring, ring. You've made it on time, no tardies. I'm so glad to have you folks. And that's second hour. My first hour is now my fifth hour. Fifth hour, please stand. Nice. It's good to see you again. Fifth hour, you did really well. Thanks for those essays I got to read tonight. Another 38 of those. That'll be great. Sit down. Seventh hour. My second hour is now seventh hour. Thank you very much. It's now time for seventh hour class. Good to see you, taking attendance, trying to meet your emotional needs, your academic activities. Talk to you about your counselor's appointments. I know your SATs are coming up. Don't stress about that. How about you guys sit down, and it's time now for my 8th hour class from 3:15 to 4:15 in the afternoon. Step up. Fantastic. There's a pep rally next week, and I don't want any of you to be late anymore. I'm really, really tired of all those things. And some of you have turned in your attendance, and I'm a little bit worried because your parents and your counselor are coming up, and many of you, the needy parents, aren't going to be here. And I'm stressed out, and I just want to go home for the day. Thank you very much. 8th hour. Have a seat. These are some of the practical realities that teachers, at least in my district and in many districts, are now facing. And I want to sort of introduce you to my sort of backstory, and it has some connection to many of the things that have been said here. I am a Detroiter, but began my life in the Warrendale neighborhood. 3 older brothers, a father who was a teamster, and a mother who was a clerical worker for much of their time. Lived in a very tiny little sort of house on Stout Avenue near Warren. And began sort of a typical, wonderful sort of storybook childhood. Had a good church, had a good family, had a good neighborhood, had friends, and strangely enough, woke up one day, 1 week, 1 month, my parents were talking about getting in the car and driving to Milford for the weekend and looking around and that sort of a thing. And it was 1973, some years after the riots, and there was a huge white flight that I, at the time, had no idea, but I was uprooted. I found myself living in the middle of a rural environment the very first time, and I was terribly worried because my friends had BB guns, and that was a dangerous thing, and I didn't know what to do with a gun, and they were shooting poor helpless birds, and it was a very strange thing. Only to learn that my parents were one of tens of thousands and others who left the city for obvious reasons. Racism, perceived deterioration of the neighborhoods, worry about living near people who were different than them. And so I spent most of my life sort of gripping, sort of understanding this change between what I thought was a stable childhood and a newfound place. And so I always spent more time coming back to the old neighborhoods and enjoying Detroit, and I always had a fascination. And as I prepared for a role in education, I was inspired by some really great educators. And I decided I would try and find work. And when I came to the job market in the 1990s, it was those days in college where the college of ed would say, look to your left, look to your right. One of the three of you will be a teacher. And when I tried to hit the job market, things were really bad. And I did what all sort of suburbanized kids did. I went to every cushy school district in Oakland County to try and find my way. So Northville wasn't having me, and Novi didn't have any jobs, and neither did Huron Valley and these other places. And I felt like I was missing my opportunity. And so I came to Detroit, and I was working, making $50 a day with no benefits, trying to become an adult, to buy a house, to maybe get married, to have a family. When I came to Detroit, I learned that they valued education in a way that suburbs didn't. And I'm talking about practical ways. They hired me as a substitute teacher. They gave me dignity and a paycheck. I got to work at everyday wages and got health benefits for my now growing family. And that was a really important thing. Those were the good old days. When I came to the DPS in 1989, the careers in public school education had a favorable outcome. And it had a rosy projection for the future. Those stories aren't so good anymore. And I look in the face of the substitute teachers who visit our classroom these days, and they don't have a union contract. They don't have wages nearly as much as we did. They don't have the propensity to find themselves moving into a career path. They're not evaluated. They're not picked up. They're not in a training program. They're just there to pass the time and take the attendance. So I found myself at DPS, and I started teaching at Northwestern High School, and I loved every minute of it. The job has become increasingly difficult. The job has become challenging more so as the class sizes have gone up, as the resources have diminished, as the state has deliberately disenfranchised the voters of the city of Detroit on and off since 1992. It's been really hard in this district to be a teacher, to be a parent, to be a student. And it's really hard to get up every day and face that. For periods of my time, I've decided I just wouldn't read the newspaper. Couldn't take it. For periods of my time, I would only selectively read and get on out because it was an onslaught for a period of time. And last year was the big one for anybody who was around DPS last year and the struggles that we had to keep the district over. It was a fight with kids like this taking a tremendous leadership role, with the labor union saying we've had it and we're stepping out onto the streets and that sort of a thing. We had really finally put the rubber to the road and had the fight in the streets like we hadn't done in quite some time. And my new friend Jalen was talking about 28 school closings that are on the block. And that's certainly an issue that I'm desperately concerned about, as everyone should. But with my perspective, having been around for a little while, I can count 107 schools closed during my career. 107. I can remember a time there were over 170,000 students in Detroit Public Schools, and today it's 47,000. I can remember a time when you had access to resources, and now you have only access to fundraising, so you can get your resources if you're lucky. So I remember the very good times, and I'm living through the bad times. But at the same time, these kids are incredible. And they can renew your spirit. They can drive you crazy. They can make you angry. But they can renew your spirit in ways that are really powerful. And I don't think it comes, you can't get the same kind of a kick that you can get out of teaching kids. And so that's sort of my way of answering your beginning question.
Thank you so much. And as always, we have way more questions and time to discuss all of them. But I do want to ask So a question, and then we're going to open it up for people to ask questions of our panelists and to have some conversation. And I told So in advance about this question, so and I'll try and frame it concisely. Obviously, we want to hear about who you are and tell us what you think the purpose of education is. But in addition, something that we talked a lot about in this class, and we looked at some maps that Peter Hammer put together last week, and Molly from 482 Forward showed us the growing number of charter schools, right? There's a lot of charter schools that have grown as the numbers that Brian talked about have gone down from 170,000 down to 46 or 47. I mean, there's different reasons for that. The city's shrunk, of course, population-wise, but also people have moved into many charters, which we've talked about. Last week, our lease used this term "ma and pop charter school," and I want to, and I hadn't heard that term before, but as distinct from a corporate charter school, right, or a grassroots charter school, and the Bog School is absolutely an example of this, and they may not use that exact terminology of ma and pop. There's certainly lots of mas and pops that have been involved, but I want So to kind of just tell us a little bit more about the school and his role in the school, and how we make sense out of supporting a wonderful school like the Bog School as a charter school in the midst of hearing a whole lot of things about charter schools that we can all recognize are pretty problematic, right? And I think the Bog School is great. And so I'm just wondering how you help us make sense out of those tensions. But thank you, So, for talking with us.
Okay, thank you. So I don't want to take too much of your time because it's been already a long evening. So my name is So Suzuki, and I am on the board of the Bog School. And Bog School is a public charter school, and all of the charter schools in Michigan are public charters, which means your public tax money goes to these schools. And also, just something to clarify, so as a public charter school board member, I am a public official accountable to you, technically, which is oftentimes neglected. Bog School is a small school. We have 118 students capacity, which is about $1.2 million operation annually. So it's not a school that runs with a little bit of money. We do require a lot of money to run the school, and we get to make decisions. But let me backtrack. So as Becca shared, this is a special space also to me. I came to Detroit a few years ago, which I think is now like 13, 14 years ago. But the Detroit summer, the office was located upstairs, and that was my first paid gig in Detroit. And the door used to be, the way the door worked was you haul from the outside door to the window right above it, and if someone's in the office, we'll drop the key, and then you'll appear and come into the building. So it's great to be back in this space. Like Becca, I knew the founders of the Bog School before. So this was a 10-year process. So about 13 years ago, there was a gathering around thinking about education, particularly in Detroit. And there were young educators who were questioning about what kind of school that they can imagine. And they met at the Bog Center, and I had the privilege of being the residents of the Bog Center back in those days. So I knew them, and when they were starting to get to the point of actually opening the school, they wanted to bring in a group of individuals who not only could support them in creating the school, but also to provide support. And I was one of the people who were asked to come on board. So this is my second term. It's a 3-year term. So this is my first year of the second term. So going back to Craig's question about the charter schools. So I mentioned to Craig in my email that Bog School isn't in any ways it's a pure school. We are a public charter school and we do contribute to the mess that is created by the public schools, and we are aware and conscious of that. And if there were options, I believe any of the board members of the Bog School or the founders would say we'd rather open the school that is not part of the charter movement, that we don't have to be accountable to the testings and reporting to the states and all of those things, except we lack the funding and we saw an opportunity in this charter system to open the door. And the other option was to wait for another 10 years to get to that point, and that felt too long. The Bog School is chartered by the Eastern Michigan University. Eastern Michigan was not the first university that we were in touch with. The first option was with the EAA. When EAA came through, there was an option for the EAA to open charter. Let me take it back. It wasn't EAA, but the DPS itself could open charter school. So we did look at that option, and we were not chosen, and we feel lucky about that. But with the EMU, Eastern Michigan being our charter authorizer, it poses challenges and questions, namely with the EAA and Eastern Michigan's board of regents providing the authorization to different entity to open schools in Detroit. We do think about what it means for the Bog School. Yes, we do want to create and operate a school that is based on creative thinking and critical thinking and create solutionaries. But at the same time, what does that mean to the rest of Detroit and to the traditional public schools? Because the bottom line is, let's be frank, we are taking the money that would be otherwise shifted towards the traditional public schools. So sometimes we do get asked that questions, and what we come back to is, is that the questions that we want to ponder at this time, or is that we want to create the space for the students and the families and the community to thrive. So it is always a balance. Let's see. Let me kind of back up and share about my background. So one of the reasons that I was asked to join the board was partially knowing the group of people who started school, but my background is in doing the youth organizing. So I was at Osborne High School on the northeast side, running an Asian American youth program. For those of you who watched the movie Gran Torino from a few years ago, that is a fictional narrative of Detroit. But what is not fictional is that there is a big Hmong American community in Detroit that was located on the northeast side. Osborne at one point was 1/3 Asian American students' body. Osborne was put on a closing list. And it didn't close, and it hasn't closed. But what the effect of school closures give isn't just that school has to close, just the idea of the closing, and any responsible families would think, what do we do for our kids? And oftentimes before school closes, they have to make a plan to think about which school they are going to attend the following year. So the last year I was running the youth program was 2 years ago at Osborne. So again, when I started the program, there was about 100 Asian American students. If you go to Osborne today, which has 3 separate high schools within the building, has probably about 5 Asian American students. So the idea of communities shifting is real, and for someone like me working with a very particular community, it's very visible to see that shift going through in the matter of 2-3 year span.
Okay, so I think we have over a half an hour for questions. That's pretty amazing. Sometimes we don't have that much time. But also for comments, and so obviously this was a wide-ranging panel. We know that there were 6 different perspectives offering a whole lot of things for us to think about. What I'd like to do is, similar to a few weeks ago, is take a few questions or a few comments from the floor, and then based on what we hear, have some folks respond. And so we have 2 mics. I wonder if I could have somebody help me, Marion or Katya or somebody run around with a microphone. It would just be helpful for that. So why don't you raise your hand if you think you might have something to say, even if you're not ready to say it right this second. That's sort of a trick, right? Because then I'm going to say, okay, Rio. So there's 2 people. Who else is interested in sharing something, a perspective or a question so far? Only 2, oh my gosh. We have one over here too. So why don't I saw Rio's hand, so can we start with you, Rio? And then we'll go over here to Emily? Heather. I was close. Rio.
I'm being a little selfish, if you don't mind, because I had 2 questions to ask, and they'll both be short. My first question was for Becca. You talked about working with the families directly, and I was wondering what your experience was for that. And my second question was for, sorry, I can't pronounce your name, sir, but I don't want to mess it up. But my question was, how do you think that additional funding could help the Gracie Boggs School?
So this is and so the first question was about parental involvement, the second was about funding. And so if the panel will bear with me, I want to take a few other questions first and comments, and then we'll come back. So you're going to have to help me remember these questions. Heather, can you pass the mic over to Heather? Thanks, Rio.
My question is for the students. We talked a little bit about mentorship from teachers, and teachers can either be discouraging or encouraging, sometimes depending on their mood for that day, or in building personal relationships. So if the students would like to speak to this, or even anyone else, what is one moment where a teacher encouraged you? And what is another moment in which a teacher discouraged you? And what is kind of the difference between those 2 moments and what you learned from that, just for future teachers or students?
Let's take one more back here, and then we'll jump up to the panel.
Thank you. To the gentleman who spoke last, could you tell me a little bit more about the Asian community in Northeast Detroit? And you said, I think that you were talking about how there was 100 students at Osborne, and now you said there was only 5 between 3 schools. Can you tell me, well, I'm from Northeast Detroit, so I would like to know specifically where that community is, and like where they go to school now, and what happened. I mean, just a little bit more information, because that was really interesting to me.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to say let's start with the students and maybe tackle that question. And so the question was about a particular moment, right, of encouragement or discouragement by a teacher. And so I don't know if you want to share any reflections on that. Adrian?
So I don't think I really have one where a teacher was more or less discouraging me, because I didn't talk to most of my teachers one-to-one, except for my AP calculus teacher, who is always trying to push every single student that he has. And he doesn't actually have a lot of students because he only has around 3 classes. So he tries to push everybody to their limits, but he knows that you can't actually do, I don't know how to explain this, but he helps you motivate yourself by giving you work that he knows you can do. He'll help you, he'll give you work to boost your confidence. He'll speak to you one-to-one after school, before school, during classes, well, in between classes when you're walking to your next class. He'll try to come up to you or like speak to you. He personally came to me one day because I actually failed this class. So I might not graduate this year because I failed this class. And he came up to me and he started talking to me saying that he wants me to graduate. So he actually gave me another chance to be able to turn in my work so that I can graduate and try to pass his class. The only reason I actually did not pass his class was because it was, since it's an AP class, it was fast-paced and I couldn't deal with the fast pace. And my school doesn't have a regular class for calculus, so I couldn't deal with the fast pace. But he actually came up to me and asked me if I wanted a second chance to actually be able to pass and graduate this year with all my friends and my peers.
Thank you. Maybe one other student response, and then we'll switch to the other question.
So this year, I had a really discouraging moment with my art teacher because I'm a student who, like, I know I'm really talkative in class, but I also know that, like, I get my work done. And my teacher, she's my art teacher, and I've never really been interested in art. I didn't think I was interested in art. And one day she came up to me, and I was doing my work, and I was actually trying hard. And I personally, I hold my pencil in a really weird way. And, I'm kind of, insecure about it, but not that much, because I'm like, hey, at least I'm writing. But she came up to me, and she told me, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm drawing, because we could draw whatever we wanted. And she was like, is there something wrong with you? Why are you holding your pencil like that? And I got mad, because I was like, oh my God, really, now the class is gonna notice. And she compared my artwork to a special ed. And at that moment, I got really mad, and I was trying to calm down because I would never want to disrespect the teacher. But comparing me to a special ed student, first of all, that's so harsh because they're special ed, and even if they are, maybe they're the best people, no one should be compared to a special ed student because I feel there's nothing wrong with them, they're just a little different. So then when she told me that, I was just like, are you serious? And I walked out of the class, and then she followed me, and she was like, where are you going? And I was like, to tell the principal, because that's not cool. And then after that, she told the principal that she didn't mean it like that. And I was like, no, you said it. And the damage is done. I'm kidding. I was like, I was so mad. I was and I feel that was really discouraging. And after that, now I have 2 artworks that were submitted to an art show. And I feel she discouraged she really she made me feel less than what I was, and that was really discouraging.
Okay, thank you. Becca, do you want to, since the mic's right next to you, do you want to take the, I don't remember the exact wording of the question, Rio, but did you catch the question?
Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah. I was wondering what your experience was working directly with the families. Particularly when you said you're working with children from infancy to 3 years old.
I can speak briefly on that. I am a social worker who works with, so the goal of infant mental health is to promote positive early relationships, parent-child relationships. Attachment theory, it's based on attachment theory, which basically everybody, you may have heard lots of stuff about how important the first 3 years of life are. And so we try to work directly with families to promote build their strengths, to recognize what the strengths are within that relationship and then promote it. So we were in a home visit, I was working in a home visiting program, so I would go and I would have my specific clients and go visit them. But I think that what it informed me about was relationship and building strengths and social emotional health being such an important part of the health of students, and it's something that we in this country for adults and children alike kind of ignore, our own mental health and our social emotional needs and our skills. There's concrete skills about having healthy relationships, and we don't really know that that's something that we're taught directly by other people. And so we don't pay attention to how we learn those skills. But that's a part of what a good school teaches too, preschool through that. And I'll just also say that right now I'm coordinating a research project that deals with Early Head Start, which is a federally funded program for kids that are younger than in the Head Start program. And they're 0 to 3-year-olds. And so there are teachers hired to be caregivers for 8 or more hours a day to 0 to 3-year-olds. And so I think that's another place our research study is trying to promote social emotional health in that area as well. So did that answer your question?
Absolutely. I have more, but I'm asking later, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Becca. And I think that there were 2 questions directed at So, 2 different questions, right? And so, please.
So one was about funding, right? And you know, I need to backtrack. So I hate to talk about money, which is real, but then what we have now is the school as business model, right? And that has just not worked. I mean, that's the bottom line. If you are in Detroit right now, you'll see a bunch of billboards advertising different schools, including traditional public schools. When I was growing up, which wasn't too long ago, schools didn't have to do that, right? You had the schools in the neighborhood where your neighbors would go to. So having these charter schools create disadvantaged foundation for community building. Back in the days, and I shared this, I think one of the sessions earlier, that I think I'm a rare case where my sister and I graduated from the same elementary school that my mom graduated, which is the same school that my grandpa graduated from. And it's rare to find this continuity where students, teacher knows the parent, and so on and so forth. So yeah, this focusing too much on the money aspects kind of is it's a big challenge that we have. But to give you a straight answer, Bog School is in the process of expansion. We had reached maximum capacity in the building last year, so we weren't able to add another classroom, which meant we had a small incoming class this current year. Next year, we would like to invite another class to join the school, but we don't have the resources yet to do that. And speaking of which, we are just in a discussion about where the money comes from. When charter school started with John Engler, what he said was any teachers and parents or families with good ideas can start a school. And anyone involved at the Bog School can tell you, yes, but it is extremely challenging. And that's why many of the charter schools are operated by for-profit management companies with generally money tied to the corporations. We don't have those connections. And we were talking about how to say no to money coming from certain funders that we don't want to deal with, not that they are offering anything at this point. But if anyone has a couple of $1 million, please talk to us later. We can use the money. And the other question was about the Asian American community. So Detroit probably has the proportionately least representation of Asian Americans amongst the major cities in the U.S. Probably it's a little over 1% of the entire population. We do have two ethnic, or I should say one at this point, that's the Bengali American community near the Hamtramck area. Oh, and I should mention the Bengali community probably are the only community that actually seeks to enroll their kids into DPS more so than trying to find a charter. It's an interesting phenomenon. And as for the Hmong community around Osborne, Hmong communities traditionally have been known for their mobility. So they were very quick and they are able to find families in different regions. But also it is tied to the economy, right? So the decline of the Hmong community isn't necessarily that one particular community. The Osborne area used to be one of the most dense residential neighborhood in Detroit. Now that is not the case. So it's not just that one community moving, but then the many residents have moved out from that neighborhood.
Thank you, so let's do another round. Maybe there's a question for Brian, our token teacher on the panel. I see Noah back here. There's either people's arms are tired or they just don't have questions. I'm not sure. Oh, there's another one. Yeah. Noah, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you for coming to speak to and with us. I don't have a question. I have some praise, actually. I went to school. I grew up in Farmington, and I went through the school system there, public school. And then I went to the University of Michigan, and all of the inspiration that I had from high school dissipated, and I had what was left was anger that comes from learning about the world in a liberal college. And so for high school, I would say my high school teachers provided the inspiration for me, and I have no memorable professors. Well, a few from Detroit. And I want you to know that I appreciate the teachers and the people who care enough to manage the schools with respect, and students who are involved and who care about it. I feel like I look up to all of you, and so thank you for coming.
I have a question for the students. I'm curious what you guys are planning on doing after high school, if you're applying to colleges, and if so, do you feel like your high schools are focusing on college readiness, and is it something that's being talked about? Do you feel like you're ready to go on to the next step?
Thank you. We'll take one more here, and then we'll kick back to the panel.
I have a question for Brian. So I am actually a former Detroit public school teacher myself. I taught at Marion Law Academy, which, if the name rings a bell, was part of the EAA. My last 2 years of teaching were the first 2 years of the EAA. And I left because of the experience of teaching in the EAA. I didn't just leave the school, I left teaching entirely. When I decided at 17 to become a teacher, the one thing that I promised myself even then was that if I ever started feeling the oncoming signs of being burnt out, such that I couldn't give my students what they deserved, that I would not do what some of my high school teachers had done and stay in the profession anyway. I promised myself that I would have enough self-awareness and be humble enough to admit to myself that I can't do this anymore and I need to leave because students deserve better. And I reached that point when I was teaching in the EAA. I fought for my students as hard as I could and as broadly as I knew how, but it just wasn't enough. So I left teaching, and that was 3.5 years ago now. I miss it. I still, whenever anybody asks me what I do, I still say, well, I'm an elementary school music teacher. I'm just not working in education right now. And hearing you talk about just the exercise you did with, here's my first hour, here's my second hour, I'm sitting here thinking, yep, that looks really familiar. I would kill to have class sizes that small because mine were in the 50s and 60s. I want to be back in education, but I look at it pragmatically, especially in this city, and I think, how can I possibly tell myself that re-entering that profession that burned me out in 5 years is a good idea? So I come to you as we'll say the person with the most experience at being a lifelong learner in the room.
That's a great question.
What do you see that you can tell a young educator who's deciding whether to come back or leave it behind?
Thank you for that. We'll start with Brian and we'll kick it back to the students.
Tell me your name.
Jordan.
Jordan, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad to answer the question, though it's possibly maybe one of the most difficult questions I may face. But I respect your decision not to, as we say in education, retire in place. There are some folks who have done that, and if you take a look at that acronym, it's RIP, which may not be any surprise, but that's sort of most accurate description of that might be on a headstone. Listen, if you can live with the day-to-day discouragements, whether they come from the main office or whether they come from an edict from downtown, whether they come from the State Department of Education, whether they come from discouraging colleagues, because you'll have some of those, and you can find the joy every day in the spirit of learning. That's the only way to cope with it. And so, it is one hell of a rewarding career. But I wouldn't mislead anyone to say that it's easy. But you have to have a thick skin, and you have to be really good at what you do. Because sometimes, if you're really, really good at what you do, those issues that come down from on high, you can challenge them with your expertise. You can say, no, I've been in this for 25 years, and this is the 5th evaluation model, and you haven't been trained in it, and I don't know it, and so let's realize that you have to evaluate me based upon a common set of values that the school represents. It can be that. It can be the little issues, the day-to-day minutia that gets in your way, and if you have some seniority and some clout in that building, you can say, hold on a minute here. Can't we approach this in a different way? You're not going to bother me about wearing a pair of jeans on a day like today when it's not jean day. Because what you don't know is I got to clean out some closets. Because we need to get books out of these closets. And so you have to will the power within yourself. And he's right about those numbers. Phys ed teachers and music teachers, their numbers are worse than mine for sure. And it's a heroic effort that our special teachers do every day. If you can find it in yourself to do it that way, I'd say come on back. But continue to educate in other ways if you don't make it back to that classroom. Because everyone in this room has a tremendous lesson to learn. And earlier when you asked the young people, what would you tell your classmates to help? What I would say to you is that you guys know how to organize communities. You know how to interact with individuals. Reach out to schools and say, listen, my particular thing is sexual health, and I work with a program that teaches people how to be sexually healthy. Can I cooperate with a phys ed / health teacher? Can I come in and help my kids in that way? You may have a particular expertise in nutrition, perhaps. So maybe you can find a way to network with a teacher and come in and visit. But the important things is to teach your kids the skills of organizing, the skills of networking, the skills that they can use to capitalize on the skills that you'll teach them, and they can move forward. That's what's going on with these kids. There's somewhere along the line, people are investing in them, and they're showing the fruits of that. If we can replicate that in lots of ways, with people who are educators, whether professional educators or itinerant educators or visiting educators. You can name these things in lots of different ways. You all can be tremendous help, even if you're not going to be a classroom teacher.
Thank you so much. We have a couple of hands. I want to, we'll come back to you, we'll probably do one more round, but I know there was a question asked of the students about kind of futures in college and college readiness and over here. And I think the students are going to respond a little bit first. Do you want to go first, Adrian?
What was the question? Oh. I do not feel college ready at all. In fact, I'm terrified of going to college. I only have less than 2 months to graduate, possibly. And I am extremely terrified of what's going to happen, whether or not I'm going to, because I've heard different things about college and universities. I've heard you either love it or you hate it, and it's just mixed. I have like extreme mixed feelings about it. I already enrolled into like about 7 different schools and universities. I got accepted into my first choice university, but I don't have enough money. So I've been thinking about other like plans and ideas. I've also thought about going to the military because it's, aside from actually going to school, it's also been like a small interest of mine, actually joining the military before going to school, or possibly going to school before and after that going to the military. But after like I started my senior year, it's starting to get more real, and I've actually had to like try to make a layout of everything, of all of my choices and all of like the prospects, the pros and the cons. And so far, I think I might just go to school first, which is Central State, Michigan, because I want to be an elementary school teacher too.
So after high school, I for sure want to go to college. And I'm still debating what college I want to go to. I basically just want to go to whatever school gives me more money because I want to be debt-free and travel and not be stressed. And I feel ready. Like, I have to remind myself, like, Alondra, you're a junior, not a senior. College is like, you know? Because my sisters always told me, like, you can't be scared of college because, like, you're going to learn. So how are you going to be scared if you're going to go learn? Like, you know, of course, you're not going to know anything because you're going to learn. So I always just put that in the back of my mind, and yeah, so I feel like I'm ready for college, and I have like a lot of mentors who are going to help me. I feel ready.
First, I would like to become a police officer here in the city. I want to go to film, study political science, and become the mayor of Detroit. College is like a big thing in my family. I have a sister who's graduating from Lane in Tennessee in April 29th. And I have a sister who's going for her master's right now at WC3. So if the mayor position don't work out, I have different alternatives. I would like to become the president of the United States.
Excellent. Thank you. So we really only have time for one more. I saw one more hand over here. And then I would like to kind of pivot from that to any final thoughts. Anybody on the panel wants to just sort of add in about a minute or so. So one more question or comment right here, please.
I'm also a DPS teacher. I wanted to echo some of what was being said about the hope that you hold on to and the power in your students. But as a young teacher, I also see the burnout ahead. And I don't know if some people saw there was a big Twitter storm and articles all week about teacher job fairs at MSU and CMU and like basically being empty. And if you talk about the oversized classes, that's a reflection of no teachers. And if you talk about what's being done with the profession of teaching, people don't want to join it. So I guess I wanted to ask, what can we do about that, especially in a setting of a university class where you might know people considering being a teacher and the struggles that that means, but also the necessity that we have. And if anyone, students or parent or teacher, can speak to like what to do about that.
Great. I'm going to say that's sort of like the last question that each of you maybe want to speak about a little bit, including anything else you want to add. Maybe give Brian the first stab since he's the veteran teacher on the panel.
Because of my labor union activism, I held out great hope that we might be able to redress some of the grievances, the financial difficulties that our district has faced over these many years with the return of the elected school board. But I was also set back when at least one of our leading candidates said, we're not so sure we're going to address any financial issues going forward with teacher education. The reality of the situation is that there's been a political and economic attack on educators, especially in this district going back to 1990, and we've just been beaten down. So my greatest hope was a publicly elected school board that would elect the first superintendent in a long time, and that would surely do it. One of the candidates said that would be necessary, and the other candidate said, I don't see that going forward. So I'm discouraged to one degree, and neither candidate is my choice. So I'm not sure.
So Becca, and then maybe any of our students want to just give us any final thoughts? It's sort of an abrupt shift, but we only have a few more minutes, so thank you.
I feel like I'm not a teacher, so I can only surmise what might make someone become a teacher and want to become a teacher, but my first thought about that is not setting teachers up to fail. So we talk about 60 student classrooms, but we also have schools that don't recognize the role of trauma in kids' lives. We have classrooms with even in we don't know how to set things up so that kids can really thrive, and I think that's what teachers are left dealing with. And so when you have kids that are acting out, they're hypervigilant, or they're disruptive in class because of their own issues that are going on, the teacher's the one that has to figure out how to manage that. And if there were better support services for students and community-based services, then I think teachers would have a better fighting chance. And it might be very exciting if what you had to do when you went into school was teach kids, and if that's what you could do, and you didn't have to babysit or provide social services or pull your hair out. If what you could do is teach, I think people would want to teach.
Thank you, Becca. So do you want to say a few words, and then we're going to have our students have the final say.
So I don't know if I have any answer to the question. But a couple of things I was thinking about is when it comes to education or anything else in this political climate, we tend to think of having one big solution to solve all the crises. And the DPS and the Detroit schools have been this experimental ground where different methods are used without any clear resolutions, and if it doesn't work the first time, we switch, and hasn't been accountability. And I don't want anyone to think the Boggs School and what we are doing with the place-based education is the solution. It is one of the ideas. And Becca talked about imagining. And I was just at the Tanesh Coates speech a couple of nights ago, and when he was asked about how to create a better, more just society, and one of his answers was to imagine, and he made a reference to our founding fathers. They had the ideas what the democracy looked like, but they imagined what it could look like. And the idea of imagination is what Grace Boggs and Jimmy Boggs talked about, to imagine what's possible in education, what's possible about creating a better community. So starting with good, creative, and critical imagination.
Thank you so much. So let's just hear, and whatever our student panelists want to add as sort of closing thoughts, whatever kind of strikes you as what you want us to take away from the evening, please.
my closing thoughts is that, I think we got so many college students in here, and that I think students in high school will actually, want to talk to you guys, see the experience that you guys had in college, and actually, hear from you and see, how is life inside college. And we have career day coming up, April 27th at King. And if anybody want to come and, speak to the students about college, that would be great. And if you have a goal, keep reaching for it. If you don't achieve it the first time, keep going for it, chase after it, and I promise you that you will reach it. And that's what I'm actually doing, trying to reach my goals. And not only that, I meant to actually say that I'm actually going to 2 schools right now. So my regular school is King, and I'm going to a trade school for culinary. And that's his Davidson, but it's Go Lightly. And I'm doing dining right now, so a waiter. And it's, we have many, we only have 2 BOTECs, so the trade school is BOTEC, and we only have 2 schools that actually offer those classes. We have culinary, wood job, law enforcement, graphics, and that's it. Those are the 4 classes. And graphics was very difficult, so I decided not to do that. So I went to culinary. I was like, I don't have a lunch hour, so I'll go to culinary where I can cook and everything. And no, I wouldn't. So, and many of the schools in, I don't believe Cass actually had BOTEC. So King actually had it, so I had to throw that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so, don't get me wrong, BPS is a great system, but they just have to, make sure that the teachers are prepared to take these type of choices, to actually take these type of positions. And, we actually King actually have a behavior counselor in the health center. And, they, the kids come down there and talk to them about, what type of issues they are having at home, in school, and everywhere. So King have many resources. We have Team Hype come in and talk to the kids. And so yeah, that's basically everything that we do.
Jalen, thank you, Jalen. Ethan? Any final thoughts you just want to share?
Well, for one, I'm extremely thankful that all of you guys showed up here, even though, I'm pretty sure you guys could tell my voice was shaking the whole entire time until just now. I was extremely nervous at the start of this because I don't think I've actually ever talked to a lot of people about what I experienced throughout my high school years, throughout my middle school years, or throughout elementary school. Especially since I've been changing schools all the time, I get to meet new people all the time. But at the same time, it's really hard to meet new people, talk about my experiences, to tell people how I feel. And I was at some point, I want to, since you guys are actually going, you guys are already done with high school, I would like to at least talk to some of you guys, because I'm graduating this year and I want to know what it's like. So since I'm terrified of I want to know what it's like to be in college, to be in university, and to see how you guys feel about it so far. What grades you guys are, what level you guys are at, if you actually like it, if I should actually go for it, or if I should go with my second choice and go into the military.
Thank you. Thank you. And then, Alondra, you got the last word.
Well, I'm also extremely thankful that you guys actually care, because my sisters are college students and they don't care sometimes. So they're just Alondra, it's high school, get over it, and but no, there's serious issues, and it just feels good to know that people who graduated high school still want to stay connected and find out more stuff. And I just feel maybe you guys can work with high school students and kind of talk to them, because you guys are younger and it feels like you guys can understand us a little bit more, and we can actually open up. And I just feel like we could create like connections and then do networking and change problems in education.
Thank you, Alondra. Thank you so much, everybody. Just a couple quick things. So if you think Adrian is ready for college, would you please applaud? In all seriousness, I mean, I work with college students regularly, and I can assure you that you are ready. You are ready. And many of the students I work with weren't probably ready. I probably wasn't ready. But not to take anything away from the challenge, right? Because it is going to be challenging. And so maybe some folks can stick around afterwards and talk for a few minutes with Adrian. All the panels were great. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful night. Let's thank everybody again. And I want to. The only announcement I really want to add, other than grab a hamburger if there's any left, is that next week's session is our last session, and it really is all about imagining and envisioning. It's really, that's what we're going to do next week. So let's take a lot of this today and this energy into our visioning next week. So Eliza and Stephen and Tom Stevens and others from the Freedom School will be here. So our final class is next week, and get ready to do some visioning with us, because we're going to do a lot more interactive stuff next week. So thank you all again for being here. Have a great night. And the bus will leave in about 12 minutes. Sorry, and the chairs, please fold the chairs and put them against the wall again.
That was the first day of I was the second senior. And so he said,
Thanks for giving
Thank you.